Think of this announcement by the French government?
First of all, I just want to say there is two parts on this proposition. There is a humanitarian help that is more than welcome because they really do need humanitarian help. And the second part is helping them to leave Iraq and offer like a home here. We thank them for the proposition, but we don't think that's the correct, like that's the right proposition. The reasons why is that Iraqis, Christian or non-Christians, all of them wants to stay there. They don't want to leave the country. They're part of them. It's been more than, as I said before, 6,700 years that the Chaldean are over there and the Christian in general for 2,000 years. They have been living in peace more than 1,300 years with people, Muslim people and other religions. What we think would be better for them is France going and asking the UN to help Iraq to get a government which would be fair for all the majority and the minority. Also help the government to get a proper army to get security and don't have this kind of issue again.
All right, but that's in the medium term. Of course, in the short term right now, we have a crisis, and the opinion, as you're saying, is divided. You're saying offering asylum is not the way. We've heard some of the Chaldean leaders say this type of message encourages violence against Christians in places like Iraq. Nathalie Goulet, was the government right to offer asylum?
Well, it's a generous offer, it's a minimum we can expect. And at the same time, we do not have any European answer. United States didn't say anything. And I would like to know what we can do, because it's their country. We have to help them to stay safe in their own country. So I think that we have open arms and full of goodwill in front of this situation, which is just unbearable. But we have to work together to find the solution. I mean, to send some United Nations forces. But you say already 5 minutes ago that the government has also to be trustful, and that we cannot have right now the right government to protect the Christian and even not the Iraqis themselves.
The previous government of Nicolas Sarkozy in France, they welcomed in 1,000 families. How did that go?
Most of them goes like quite well, but I just want to point something. It was about 1,500 people, and on those you had Christian, but you had also Shiite or other minorities that were persecuted there. They were, in majority, yes, there were Christian, but not only Christians. So even if I think the proposition as at today, they say Christians because maybe they're the voice that they're maybe mainly hearing as of today, but I'm sure that they will open this for everyone, as they did in the previous government, because they did the same proposition. But you see that they did the proposition, but as of today, the position is worst.
The position is worse for them. The Greek Catholic Patriarch in Lebanon, quoted in the Daily Star, as saying thanks but no thanks, similar to what you're saying. We do need someone to receive us, but we need someone to help us stay in our land, help us fight terrorism and takfiri groups, end this arms race benefiting these groups. That's similar to the call we have from one viewer saying Iraqi Christians should not run away, but fight for their land. Ardavan Amir Aslani.
Providing asylum is always a good thing, but it's not the solution. If France were supposed to provide asylum, where the Libyans would qualify even earlier, because if the 5 million Libyans, if they're in that situation today, compelling France to evacuate its own citizens, they qualify just as much as anyone else. The problem is that the international civilized community should not tolerate a group of people who promote sexual mutilation of women, for example, who want to impose religious tax upon minorities. And the action should be immediate so as to enable these minorities to live in their ancestral traditional homelands. And that's where the problem is. Not much is being done. The Americans so far have only sent over 300 military advisors to Baghdad. The Iranians have brought their own forces on the Iraqi frontier so as to provide some moral coverage to the Shias. But the Christians, who's fighting out for them? No one. No one. Thank God the Kurds are at least over there. They're providing them some kind of a safe sanctuary. But they're the only guys left around without any country actually fighting for their rights. Everybody else has their own ally. The Takfiri groups, the fanatical Sunni movements, have the Saudis, the Qataris behind them. The Baghdad Shia government has Iran behind them. Who do the Christians have?
Who do the Christians have? Nonetheless, Nathalie Goulet, I've heard debates on French radio this week saying, why just Christians to welcome in? It's been 3 years. There's been a horrible civil war in Syria. Why not also welcome in Syrians who are not Christian?
Well, I think that any situation will create a partition or single religion country where it was a multiculturalism previously. It's a bad signal. You saw what happened in Palestine, you see what happened in Gaza, you see what happened in Iraq, in Nigeria, in Mali. Everywhere there are some situations which are really unbearable. And if we are expecting something from international community, we really have to wake it up very seriously and to wake up any kind of people who is able to move the international community. So I think that
international community. Let me bring it back to the point you made in part one of our discussion about how it was at the root of, in 2003, the Americans who invaded Iraq. You have a fan on Twitter saying, "Thumbs up, Nathalie Goulet, for stating the fact. We, the advanced thinkers of this world, know what caused the problem in Iraq." We're back to talking about who owns the problem and whose job is it to fix it. And the implication is that when we're talking about the international community coming in to defend the minorities in Iraq, well, is it Washington?
But you see that international community is just unable to do anything nowhere. You have dead children every minute in Gaza. So we are not going to trust international community. We have to help a civil society and try to work together.
Elisa Rubin, just back from Baghdad, can Iraq fix this problem on its own?
Well, it certainly hasn't been able to yet. And it seems that there's a lot, there are a lot of obstacles. Everything from the fact that the military has as you were saying, has largely collapsed, and at least collapsed in several places. They're trying to muster it again, but it's difficult. They've called up lots of volunteers, but volunteers don't have experience. But I think the problem, and it's a conundrum I don't know if policymakers in the U.S. are thinking about, but it certainly has occurred to me, is if you, when you help Iraq, you are now looking at a territory, if you look at Iraq and Syria, where the borders have effectively been significantly erased. And if you help Iraq, that's even assuming the U.S. could help Iraq, and I think the U.S. record in Iraq is not very good, as Nathalie Goulet pointed out, and many, many problems. But if they could, are they also helping Assad, Bashar Assad, who many people feel is a human rights abuser beyond compare? And because you are in stifling or attempting to kill everyone in the Islamic State, or whatever it is one imagines the U.S. might be able to do, you're certainly also helping the Syrian government. And that's a very complicated decision.
And it's been said that the Syrian government has given the Islamic State a very wide berth.
I can't judge that. I've certainly heard that, but I think it's hard to know if they've given it a wide berth or if they're working their way up in that direction to try to go after it. I think you could argue that. But in any case, it just seems to me that the geopolitical nexus that has been created in Iraq is exceptionally complicated, and the U.S. would also have to work closely with Iran, a country with which it has never worked closely, but actually the U.S. and Iran are on the same side on this. and it would need to do that, and that's something that's controversial in the international community. For instance, France has been among the most critical of Iran on the nuclear issue. So everybody has to go an extraordinary distance on this to actually come up with a response.
Ardavana Miraslani, is it possible? Is it doable?
No, you know my position. I believe that there is a natural tendency for the Americans and the Iranians to reach an agreement so as to bring some calm to the entire area. There won't be a solution and peace in Iraq without an active involvement of the Iranians. It's a foregone conclusion. The government of Nouri al-Maliki in Baghdad came to power with the assistance of the Iranians, who pushed their own allies and proxies in Iraq to vote for him and side with him. The future prime minister of Iraq will be someone that the Iranians have vetted. But going back to the Christian issue, when you look at this conflict in Syria, because there is also a Christian element over there, people forget that 9% of the Syrian population is comprised of Christians. Now we understand, by witnessing the tragedy that the Christian community in Mosul is going through in Iraq, why the Christians in Syria have sided with the Assad regime, because they saw this thing coming. And the reason for which the ethnic minorities in Syria, all of them, no exceptions, the Christians, the Alawites, the Kurds, the Turkmens have sided with the Assad regime is because they're fighting for their own lives. And these people that moved into Iraq, they are just a few thousand extraordinarily aggressive and violent terrorists. As it was rightly pointed out, they managed to conquer large swaths of territory in Iraq, not because they were numerous, but because they enjoyed local support from, for example, the Naqshbandi Sufi order that is allied with the Al-Duri people of the previous Saddam regime fame, with the Arab tribes who are sick and tired of the biased attitude of the al-Maliki regime with reference to the Sunnis at large. A number of arguments came together to provide these people with an open road to go ahead. But we have to stop them once and for all. France, unfortunately, can't do much because France has adopted an extraordinarily aggressive attitude towards the Iranians, beginning with the nuclear issue and beyond, since the Sarkozy administration.
They sent a lot of business leaders to Tehran.
Yes, the MEDEF did, not the French government. And the French government today doesn't have a lot of allies in Baghdad today. Doesn't. And the Iranians are not willing today to follow a French path. They are willing to follow an American path, though. And as you can imagine, I can hardly conceive of an American military operation in Iraq without Iranian influence. The Iranians don't have troops there, but they have allies who are trained. Yeah. The Al-Mahdi army is trained. The Al-Bad brigades are trained. And these are tens of thousands of Shias who have been financed and armed by the Iranians for the last decade, ready to go to war. That's why the Takfiri fanatical Sunni people haven't managed to conquer Samarra. That is why they have been constrained to remain exactly where they are, because the Iraqi army and the Shia population is regrouping.
Nathalie Goulet, did France play its cards wrong? We've seen continuity between right and left-wing governments when it comes to its reading of the situation.
Well, I've not the knowledge of our friend Amir Aslani. But at the same time, we have to understand that this area, this special region is like a Rubik's Cube, It's something is moving, everything is moving. And then to fix it, it will take time. And everywhere where Pax American have failed, you need Iran to fix it. So I think that the French government has to review seriously its position regarding Iran, because Iran will be needed. And United States know Obama is now working on it. And I think that it's the next step will be to discuss with Iran to find a solution.
I want to pick up on a point you made earlier, Nathalie Goulet, about the Arab Spring of 3 years ago becoming the Islamist autumn at this point. And let me put this to you, Elisa Rubin. We see this power vacuum that's ensued, and in it, you were talking about the Australian who blew himself up in Baghdad. In this globalized world, jihadists move around all the way from Mali to Iraq.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there is a kind of chaos and tearing apart in Iraq. It's been centered in Iraq, but we're seeing it in Syria as well, that you see in smaller ways. Even there's been enormous tensions and troubles in Egypt and in Libya. There is a deep realignment going on. And I don't know exactly where it's going, but the one thing that I think everyone here is testifying to is that innocent civilians should not be the victims, and that somehow there has not been a really eloquent effort to really keep people safe. And whether they are Christians in Mosul or Shabak in Sinjar or whatever groups they are, it's a terrible thing. And I think that it's been very hard for people to separate out sometimes old geopolitical interests, whether that's France and Iran's or America and Iran's, and figure out, okay, maybe we can't solve everything, but we could work together on this narrow thing or on that narrow thing. That has to be the way forward when it comes to strategy.
And the fact that the nationalism of old that we saw in the Arab world is replaced by political Islam, how does that play into that?
Well, I think it makes it very difficult because people are not controlling states, and if you are a leader of what is still a state, whether that be France or the United States or the UK, you want to deal with nations because those are people who stand by their bargains and they're elected and there's some security there. But who do you even go to if you want to talk to the head of ISIS? Who do you even go to in Iraq if you are trying to find the right person for the Mahdi army? Do you go to Iran? Do you go to Muqtada al-Sadr? Do you go to someone else? It's not simple to find authorities with whom you can even make deals. And that's, to me, the heart of the problem in terms of some of the chaos that we're seeing.
And as you said, there are some elements of this that are more entrenched. A Pew survey back in 2011, 2012 went around the globe asking Muslims how they perceive themselves. 39 countries. In Kazakhstan, 74%, and Indonesia, 56% said they were neither Sunni or Shia, they were just Muslims. In Iraq, 5%.
Of course.
It is 5% say I'm just a Muslim. The others say I'm either a Sunni or Shiite.
Of course, because it has become an issue. It always was an issue, but it has become an immediate issue today. And when you look at Islam per se, I mean, even in France, you've got 800 French citizens fighting in Syria and Iraq today on a revolving basis, continuously over there. There was a report on one of your shows whereby the terrorist was speaking in German.
Yeah.
The problem has become so urgent that people have forgotten that Islam today has become an identity. If you go to the suburbs of Paris, for example, and you ask me where you're from, they may not say we're French. They're going to tell you we're Muslim. And what we saw in the streets of Paris recently, pursuant to the events in Gaza, pursuant to a soccer match, translate this fact. And in Iraq, a country that is not even 100 years old, in light of all this sectarian strife and extreme violence that every community is a victim of, people have a tendency to define themselves by their tribes or their religious denomination. And it's a tragedy.
To define Go ahead, Nathalie Goulet.
No, I was just pointed that I asked an inquiry committee in the Senate for those French people who are fighting with the jihad in Syria or wherever. And in addition to Muslim, you have most part of them are convert into Islam. So this identity becomes a real issue for other people. So it's really a big problem, I think.
Islam as an identity, but also the other religions as an identity. Christelle, let me ask you, confessional divides, why do they matter so much more in 2014 than they did in the past?
I don't think that there is like confessional divide in Iraq, because if you look at the jihadists, most of them, I'm not saying all of them, but most of them are people out of Iraq. They're not Iraqis. They were peaceful with all the religious since thousands of years. It's been a long time that there were no issues. But since now, there is no stability in that country. The people are like the jihadists, the extremists, which are a small group. They're not the majority of people. Take the advantage of it and see that there is no stability. So what they want to have an Islamic state, but they see here there is no army, there is no one, So we can come here and fight and we'll get everything. So we need to bring stability to those countries. We need to create a government. The UN need help the Middle East to get stability by creating governments, armies, and constitutions that are fair for every minorities.
So you're saying it's the UN's job?
From my point of view, I think it's everyone's job, but the UN is more than just US or just France or just, I don't think that this is the job, just French job or just US job or UK job. This is like, there is a humanitarian disaster there. You have to go like far than just a country. I think everyone like should be like just shocked and go and do something there. So I think that's our point of view. The UN would be giving, like, it's more than just one country. Everyone should be involved on it.
All right, the whole planet should be involved. Christelle Yalap, I want to thank you. I want to thank Elisa Rubin. I also want to thank Ardavan Amir Aslani, Nathalie Goulet for being with us today from London. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.
Thank you.